Guys, I'm sure that you must have heard that functions are first class citizens in JavaScript, all right? And I've covered functions in detail in my JavaScript series, link of which is available down below in the description. Now, just briefly, functions are building blocks of readable, maintainable, and reusable code. A function is a set of statements to perform a specific task, okay? Now, once you define a function, you can call it as many times as you want. Okay. Now, we can define function using both regular and function expression syntax, just like we do in JavaScript. All right. So I'll use function expression syntax for exemplifying the agenda of this video. All right. So let's start. So how do we create functions? We say let greet1 equal to, then opening and closing brackets. Now guys, inside these opening and closing brackets, we can define a parameter, but for this example, we'll leave this empty. Then we have this fat arrow syntax, all right, and then opening and closing braces. Inside this, you write your block of statements, okay? But we keep it simple. We simply say console log and hello world, like that. So our function is ready, okay? Now to invoke this function, all you have to do is you have to say greet1, okay, and like that, okay, and this will do the job. Okay, this is going to invoke this particular function. Okay, and when we do so, we are going to print this hello world to the console. So let me save it, go to our application, and we see hello world. Great, that's how you invoke this. Now, due to type inference, we can't allocate any other value to variable greet1. Okay, let's over this. What do you see in here? Colon, then opening and closing brackets, this fat arrow, and void. All right. So this is a function, and we'll see what void is and all. Okay. Now let's try this. So I'm going to comment this out, and we say greet1 equal to 10. It is not allowed. Okay. Also, we can explicitly declare a variable to be function. Okay, like so. So you have this like greet2. You say colon, and you say function, and f in this function is in caps. Okay. Now you can't assign greet2 is equal to 10, but you can definitely, let's say you say greet2 equal to, and I simply just copy this stuff. Okay, and we say hello world, let's say 2, right? And now you can invoke this function. Okay, very simple, just like we did it here. Okay, great. Now we talked about parameters, right? Now parameters are very important because with the help of parameter, right, you can generate different output. All right, so what you write in here is basically the the logic which is going to process the input. Okay, now what is that input? The things that you pass in the form of parameters, they become input to a function. All right, and this becomes your processing logic. All right, and you get the output, right? So we get the output with the help of return statement. All right, so we are also going to see that. So now we are going to work on the input that we pass on to the functions. Okay, now in TypeScript, every parameter is assumed to be required by the function. So every parameter is basically a required parameter. Okay, this does not mean that it can't be given null or undefined, but rather when the function is called, the compiler will check that the user has provided a value for each parameter. Okay, now the compiler also assumes that these parameters are the only parameters that will be passed to the function. In short, the number of arguments given to a function has to match the number of parameters the function expects. Okay, now these parameters are just like variables. Okay, they can be of single data type or can also be of union data type. Let's see one example of each. So we say let multiplication is equal to, okay, and inside this we are going to pass our parameters. Okay, but let's complete the other parts of the function. Okay, so now we say in here num1, all right, colon num2, all right, and we say this is going to be of type, let's say, number. Okay, and same way num2 is of type number. So we are only providing one data type for each of these parameters. Okay, and then we simply say return num1 multiply num2. Okay, so this is how we define parameters and associate the respective data types. Okay, now let's see an example of union data type. Okay, so we say let id is equal to, and again those brackets, let's complete the structure first, like that. So in here I just say user id, right? It could be of type string or number. Okay, so we say number type symbol string, right? Just like we do that with variables. Okay, no difference. And then we say in here, let's say return, and we use strict literal syntax now. So we have two backticks, and I just say dollar, inside that I mention user id. Okay, I say is active. All right, now a function may also have optional parameters. Now, by definition, an optional parameter is a handy feature that enables programmers to pass less number of parameters to a function and assign a default value. In JavaScript, every parameter is optional, okay? And users may leave them off as they see fit. When they do, their value is undefined. We can get this functionality in TypeScript by adding a question mark to the end of the parameters we want to be optional. Any optional parameter must follow required parameters. Okay, now to make this is a simple function which has three parameters, and these are the respective data type of each of these parameters. Okay, now like I mentioned, it has to be at the end, so we can make this C parameter optional by adding this question mark. Okay, so now this is our function. Alright, so let's invoke it. And in the first case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to provide in all the values. So I'm saying 10, 20, and 30, right? So 10 for A, 20 for B, and 30 for C. Let's save it and check that in the console. So we see 60. Great, right? Now let's do one thing. Let's execute this one now, wherein we are only passing A and B. Okay, C is optional, right? So I can do that. So when I hit save button now, right here, I see NaN, not a number. All right, so what is the problem in here? Okay, let's check the JavaScript code as well. So I open that. Okay, so you see there are three parameters. Okay, so we do not see that question mark in here because we don't have that in JavaScript. All right, now when you say 10, 20, and undefined, right? So you can't add 30 with undefined, right? When you do so, I mean, the output is not a number, and that's why you see NaN. Now, there are two things, right? How can you solve that? And what if, I mean, there is an opportunity for you to find that out while doing the development itself, okay? That this may throw an error, this may be null, this may be undefined, right? Isn't it? That will be really handy. So for that, let's start with how can I find that out first, okay, while in development. So I'm going to open a new terminal in here, all right? And now, guys, we are going to generate a file. All right, so if this TypeScript compiler is our genie, right, so we have a list mentioned in a file. Okay, now that genie reads all that instruction provided in that file and does the job for us. Okay, so we are going to add one more wish basically in that list, right? And after that, Genie will tell us, hey, this might be undefined, this might be null. All right. So let's do that. And guys, I'm going to create a separate video on this file which I'm going to generate. So now let's focus on this particular problem. How can we, you know, how can we get rid of this problem, all right, while in development? So we just say, like, to create that file we say tsc space double dash init, and this is going to generate tsconfig.json at the root of your project. All right, And see guys, this is our wish list, right? And Microsoft has done a great job in providing all these different options, and also like what each option is supposed to do. All right, so we come down and basically we just enable this flag. All right, currently it is commented out, so let's uncomment that strict null checks. Okay, and I'm simply going to just index.js. I'm going to close it. All right, save it. Now I go back. Okay, and in here you see, now I start seeing this object is possibly undefined. All right, earlier it wasn't there. All right, like I said, I'm going to create a video on this, and I'm going to cover the important options from this list. Okay, but for now stay with me. So we get this error, we get this error in here, which is suggesting that there might be some problem, right? So guys, what is the solution? Now let me comment this out. Okay, and I'll show you the solution. So we say, let me just copy this. Okay, uncomment this one. And the solution is very simple guys. You have to handle the undefined part, right? So you just say if C means, if this is not undefined. All right, so you do this, else you say okay, C might be undefined, so you leave it like this. Okay, so this is how you're going to handle your function. Okay, now if we invoke this, all right, it would work in both the cases. All right, so I will uncomment both of these options. So in the first one we'll see 30. All right, because this block will be executed, and when I say 10, 20 and 30, this one would get executed. All right, so we see 30 and 60 respectively in the console. All right, like so. All right, so important things about optional parameter, they should always be after all the required parameters. All right, and make sure that you handle these optional parameters in your code. Okay, and to find that out, just turn this feature on. All right, and your genie will do the rest. Okay, great. So let me close this and we move on to and comment these out. Right, now let us see uh, the default parameters now. Okay, now function parameters can also be assigned values by default. Such parameters are called as default parameters. However, such parameters can also be explicitly passed values. Okay, now this is my optional parameter. Okay, if I want to make it a default parameter, I just assign it some default values like this. Okay, now we see we get an error in here, and which it states that parameters cannot have question mark and initializer. Okay, so this is the initializer. So either it could have this question mark or this default initialized value. Okay, so we get rid of this now, and everything works now guys. I mean, what you can do is you can pass in two values, or you can pass in three values. In both the cases it would work. Let's see. So let us change the name of the function in the console. Right, save it and execute that. So we'll see 10, 20, and since we are not passing the value of C, it is going to take 10 as the default value of C, and that would be 40. All right, and in this case, since we are passing in 30, so it is going to override this default value of C. All right, so then the outcome would be 30 plus 20 plus 10, 60. All right, so we'll see 40 and 60 in the console. Let's save it and go to the application. So we see 40 and 60. All right, unlike optional parameters, default initialized parameters don't need to occur after the required parameters. Okay, so here's an example. What I've done is, I mean, this is the same example, right? But what I've done is, instead of keeping this default parameters at the last, I put it at the first, okay, in the list. Now, if a default initialized parameters comes before a required parameter, users need to explicitly pass undefined to get the default initialized value. Okay, now how are you going to invoke this? Very simple, right? So you're going to say, let me just copy this because this is the case that we have to see, right? So we just say, uh, let us change the name, and we pass in here undefined, like so. All right, now what will happen? What will be the outcome? So since we are not passing anything, so C would be 10. Okay, and then for A we have this 10 and 20. So 10 and 10 20 and 20 40. Okay, so the output would be 40. So we comment the previous console statements, save it, go back to our application, PC 40, guys. All right, return type now. So we can add types not just to each of the parameters, but can also do to the function itself to add a return type. Now TypeScript though can figure the return type out by looking at the return statements. So we can also optionally leave this off in many cases. Okay, let's see both of the cases now. So this one is a very basic function, right? We have already created functions like this above. Okay, now in here, what do you see? We say, okay, type inference, right? So which means that based on this return statement, all right, we are going to get the type of this, and you could clearly see. So someone, okay, this is your return type. So after the fat arrow, you see number. Okay, so number is the return type of this function. Okay, so when you invoke this function, okay, so let's say you do it like, so you say let output, okay, equal to, and you invoke this function. That's the next thing. So you know the return type of the function, okay, and you pass in some values like 1 or 2, like so. And now let's check out the data type of this variable also, right? It is number now. Why? Because this function, the return type of this function is number. Okay, so you are assigning a numeric value to this variable, and hence the output is of data type number. Okay, so this is all implicit. Okay, so this is type inference. Next is explicit, right? So guys, what you can do is, again, there is no need basically to set the the function type explicitly, right? But at times it makes sense also. Might be like you're creating such a long function that, in here you see, you are seeing the declaration of the function, all right, and it's over in here. But might be in your case, you might be writing a function of like 50 lines of length, right? So if you explicitly mention in here, all right, your developers knows that, at the end the return type has to be this. All right, and I'll show you one more example. So what do we say is, I explicitly mention in this case that it has to be of type boolean. All right, so this is how you do that. Now, why at times it's required? So I just say in here that the return type is string. Okay, immediately get this error. Okay, because this return is returning me number and not string. Okay, so might be that I have made some mistake in the logic. All right, so this will help me in returning the correct data type from the function. Okay, so in those cases we can use that. All right, now last one is in the list, void, right? So we do have void in TypeScript similar to languages like Java, right? Void is used where there is no data. For example, if a function does not return any value, then you can specify void as return type, right? And here's an example. So you see, grade 3 is returning us void because in here we're just logging into the console, right? And we are not returning anything from this function, right? So guys, that's about functions in TypeScript. I'll see you in the next video. Thank you so much.